Hello, assistants, and welcome to Strengthening Our Salvation. May God bless you wherever you are. I usually say that these messages are for assistants and anyone who wants to watch them. But today I want to speak to you specifically, who is an assistant, a pastor, whoever you may be. Of course, if you're a member of the church, or anybody who stumbles across this message, you can watch it as well. But again, it is especially for those who do the work of God. Well, I want to invite you to cast your mind back to the very first either assistance night vigil that you took part of, your very first assistance meeting that you took part of, the very first assistants general meeting where the whole country or the whole city was there present where you were. If you're like me, that first ever meeting was very special. I remember that meeting until today. And I felt honored and privileged to be in that meeting. And the same thing happened the second general assistance meeting I went to, or assistance night vigil that I went to, and so on. But prior to us serving God as assistants or pastors or whatever it is, the meetings that were special to us were the Wednesday meetings, the Sunday meetings. When we went to these services, they felt special. And sometimes when we start serving God and taking part of assistance meetings and so on, those meetings of Wednesday and Sunday, at least in our mind, they tend to not feel as special. And that's wrong, of course. But why am I saying that? Because it is very common to see sometimes the way that those who serve God treat the services of Wednesday and Sunday. The nature of us serving God as assistants or pastors is that we are in those services to serve the people. And sometimes what happens is that the assistant goes to that service with the mentality to help the people, to serve the people, but they forget about their own spiritual life. And then it's common, unfortunately, it shouldn't be common, but it's common to see that in these services, Wednesday and Sunday, and eventually as time passes, also general assistance meetings, it's common to see some assistants, not many, but some, that when you see how they are in the moment of seeking the Holy Spirit, the moment of glorifying God, you see that the body language of that person who should be praying fervently. Remember, the Bible calls us to serve fervently. But when you look at the body language of that person, you see a lack of interest. You see a very complacent kind of prayer, of body language, during the message even. I remember, I'll tell you about my experience. The very first general assistance meeting that I went to when I was an assistant was one where all the assistants in the country were taking part of that meeting in Lisbon at that time. And I traveled on a coach 3 hours to get there, 3 hours to get back. And that night, I never forget that night vigil. I was in a service with thousands of assistants. And I remember the bishop at that time made an altar call for those who wanted to serve God on the altar. And I went forward in that prayer. And there, in front of the altar, I poured out my soul, asking God to use me. But it's sad to see, like we said, that as time goes by, things that were once special for those who served God, they become trivial. Not that they're trivial, but they become trivial in the mind of that assistant. And that, if anything, is already a sign of the beginning of the downfall of that person. Because, of course, you have to understand the way that you pray says a lot about your spiritual life, your relationship with God. That's why we said, going back to what we mentioned earlier, the Bible calls us to pray fervently. What is a fervent prayer? It is one that includes mind, body, and soul. Everything of who you are, your whole being, is involved in that prayer. I know that some people would like us to think, to pull the wool over our eyes and say, no, Bishop, I know my body language looks that I'm not interested, but deep down I am. I'm sorry. Don't lie to yourself. Because how do you think that God feels when, because God sees everything, he looks at a football stadium and he sees the fervent shouts of a football fan cheering on that team. But when it comes to seeking God, to praising God, to glorifying God, you see there sometimes an assistant that his body language, her body language shows that she doesn't want to be there. If she could, she'd be somewhere else. But that was not the case in the beginning. No one started serving with lack of fervor. So when the Bible calls us in the book of Revelation to return to our first works, this is one of the things that we have to return to. I want to challenge you, assistant, and whoever you are that you're watching, pastor, whoever. I want to make a challenge with you for you to rescue the holiness of the services, whether meetings, services you attend, like when you started serving God in the beginning. In fact, even the days that you don't serve, perhaps on Wednesday you don't serve, you go to seek for yourself, rescue the holiness of those meetings when you were seeking the baptism with the Holy Spirit. Consider your own body language when you serve God, when you seek the Holy Spirit in the services, when you're sitting down in a service to have God speak to you. Maybe you used to leave an assistance meeting and tell your colleagues, wow, today God really spoke strongly to us. But maybe recently you leave the Wednesday service, the assistance meeting, and the first thing you do is to consider the things you have going on outside in your life that can wait. Things that are even unimportant. Do you want to take on this challenge? Make a challenge to go on Sunday to the church as if it was that Sunday when you were discovering your faith, your relationship with God. Make this challenge to go to the next assistance meeting as if it was the very first one that you sat. I remember when I sat in that assistance night vigil, in my mind, those assistants were like angels. That's right. I saw them as angels. I felt that I didn't deserve to be sitting there among them. Bishop, but we mature. But should we mature from thinking like this? Or should we continue to think that it's a privilege to serve God, that we don't deserve to be there, and that the people who are around us, servants of God, together with us, are indeed like angels who serve our God? Consider your body language. Consider how you've been serving, seeking God, and rescue the holiness from the beginning. Not only when you put on your uniform, but even when you are in the church seeking God for yourself. My dear friends, may God bless you, and if you feel that this message helped you, feel free to share it with someone else. God bless you. Bye-bye.